From homeless to entrepreneur, Jamal grew up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce and adversity was everywhere. Life was hard, but it became even tougher when his parents passed away in a car accident when he was just 15. Their death threw him into a whirlwind of uncertainty. With no close relatives to take him in and a foster care system that was already overloaded, Jamal quickly found himself homeless. At first, he tried to stay in school, juggling homework and exams with finding safe places to sleep. But as the nights on park benches and behind bus stations dragged on, school started to feel like a distant dream. Food became a luxury. He survived mostly on meals from local soup kitchens and shelters when they had space for him. Every day was a fight to survive, and hope seemed like something that belonged to another world. Jamal was ashamed of his situation. He avoided friends, not wanting them to see how far he had fallen. At night, he would lie awake, thinking about his parents and how they had always wanted more for him. He wondered if they would be disappointed in the person he had become. The weight of his loss was overwhelming, and for a long time, he felt trapped in his circumstances. But one day, as he was sitting outside a community center trying to stay warm, a stranger approached him and asked if he wanted a hot meal. The stranger, a social worker named Ms. Rivers, handed him a plate of food and struck up a conversation. Jamal was guarded at first, used to people pitying him but never offering real help. However, Ms. Rivers was different. She listened without judgment, and after a long talk, she told him about a free coding boot camp the community center was offering to disadvantaged youth. Jamal was hesitant. He had no experience with computers beyond basic schoolwork, and he doubted he could succeed in such a program. But Ms. Rivers was persistent. She explained that coding was a skill that could open doors to stable, well-paying jobs and that the boot camp was a safe place for him to learn. She encouraged him to give it a try. After much thought, Jamal decided he had nothing to lose. With Ms. Rivers' help, he enrolled. The boot camp wasn't easy. In the beginning, Jamal struggled to keep up with the other students. Coding was like a foreign language, and there were days he felt like giving up. But slowly, something began to change. The more he practiced, the more things started to make sense. He started to enjoy the process of solving problems, writing code, and seeing the results of his work on a screen. His instructors noticed his determination, and they encouraged him to keep pushing forward. Jamal found himself staying late after class to learn more, hungry for the knowledge that could pull him out of his circumstances. As months passed, he gained more confidence, and his skills grew. He even started helping other students who were struggling, offering tips and advice. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was in control of his future. When the boot camp ended, Jamal didn't stop. He continued teaching himself new coding languages and working on small freelance projects he found online. Eventually, with Ms. Rivers' help, he landed an internship at a local tech company. The internship was unpaid at first, but Jamal didn't care. He saw it as a stepping stone to something greater. After 6 months, his hard work paid off, and the company offered him a full-time position as a junior developer. The salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to afford his own small apartment and start rebuilding his life. For the first time in years, Jamal had a place to call home. He continued to work tirelessly, learning from his colleagues and improving his skills. Within a few years, Jamal was no longer just another junior developer. He had developed a reputation for being a talented problem solver, and his work had caught the attention of larger companies. He took a risk and started his own app development business, focusing on creating apps that helped people in low-income communities access resources and support services. His business grew steadily, and Jamal became known not just for his technical skills but also for his commitment to giving back. He hired people who had been in situations like his, homeless, struggling, and needing a second chance. He also began speaking at youth shelters and schools, sharing his story of overcoming homelessness and encouraging young people to believe in their potential. Today, Jamal is the CEO of a thriving tech company that employs over 50 people. His apps are used by thousands of people across the country, and he continues to mentor youth who are facing the same challenges he once did. He often reflects on his journey, from sleeping on park benches to running his own business, and he realizes that while his past was full of pain, it also shaped him into the person he is today, resilient, determined, and deeply empathetic. When asked what advice he would give to someone in a situation like his, Jamal says, "Don't let your circumstances define you. You can build a different future, one step at a time. All it takes is one opportunity, one person who believes in you, and a willingness to believe in yourself." Jamal's story is one of transformation, but it's also a reminder that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always hope for a brighter future.
Surviving addiction. Sarah was the person everyone loved to be around. She had a magnetic personality, always quick with a joke or a smile. Her friends often referred to her as the life of the party, and for years, that was exactly what she was. In her early 20s, Sarah would go out most weekends, drinking with friends, dancing until dawn, and embracing the wild and carefree life she believed was expected of her. But what began as harmless fun slowly spiraled into something much darker. By the time Sarah was 27, her drinking wasn't confined to the weekends anymore. What started as a way to have fun with friends became a way to numb the stress and anxiety she constantly felt but never spoke about. Her job as a sales manager was demanding, and the pressure to meet targets weighed heavily on her. When the drinks no longer took the edge off, Sarah turned to stronger substances. First prescription pills, then harder drugs. She told herself it was just a way to cope, a temporary solution to her problems. But the solution quickly became the problem. Sarah's addiction deepened, and her life began to unravel. Her once thriving career suffered. She started missing work, and when she did show up, she wasn't herself, sluggish, unfocused, and disconnected. Her relationships with friends and family became strained. They noticed her growing dependence on substances and tried to intervene, but Sarah pushed them away. She didn't want to hear their concerns, nor did she want to confront the reality of her situation. Her lowest point came when she lost custody of her young daughter, Lily. Sarah had always been a loving mother, but addiction clouded her judgment, leading to neglectful behavior that eventually caught the attention of Child Protective Services. Losing Lily was a wake-up call that shook Sarah to her core. It shattered her, leaving her overwhelmed by guilt, shame, and regret. But it also planted a seed of determination in her heart, the determination to get her life back. Sarah knew she needed help but didn't know where to start. After some persuasion from her sister, who had been her most consistent source of support, she agreed to check into a rehab facility. When she arrived, Sarah was terrified. She had always prided herself on being independent, and asking for help felt like admitting defeat. But deep down, she knew that this was her last chance to turn things around. Rehab wasn't easy. The first few weeks were hell. Detoxing from the substances that had taken over her life left her feeling physically sick and emotionally raw. Without the numbing effects of drugs and alcohol, all the pain, grief, and unresolved trauma she had been avoiding for years came flooding to the surface. There were days when Sarah wanted to give up, to walk out and return to the life she knew, no matter how destructive it had been. But something inside her, maybe it was the memory of Lily's smile or the desire to finally break free, kept her going. Over time, Sarah began to open up in group therapy sessions. She listened to the stories of others who had faced addiction and saw that she wasn't alone. Their honesty and vulnerability gave her the courage to confront her demons. Slowly, she began to piece together how her addiction had taken hold of her life, how it was fueled by the unresolved pain of her parents' messy divorce, the pressure she placed on herself to succeed, and the anxiety she had carried for as long as she could remember. For the first time, she stopped blaming herself and started understanding that addiction was a disease, one that she could fight with the right support. In addition to therapy, Sarah found solace in writing. Every night, she journaled her thoughts and feelings, pouring out the pain, the fears, and even the small victories she experienced during her recovery. Writing became a way for her to process everything she had been through. Her journal became a source of strength, a reminder of how far she had come. After several months in rehab, Sarah was ready to leave. But she knew that leaving the facility was only the beginning of her journey. Recovery was a lifelong process, and she couldn't return to her old habits or surroundings. She decided to move in with her sister temporarily, giving herself the stability she needed to continue healing. Sarah attended regular AA meetings, found a sponsor, and built a new network of friends who understood the challenges of staying sober. These meetings were a lifeline, places where she could be honest about her struggles and find support without judgment. Slowly but surely, Sarah began to rebuild her life. One of her greatest motivations during this time was her daughter, Lily. Regaining custody wasn't easy, and it took over a year of proving to the courts and herself that she was stable and committed to her sobriety. The day she was granted visitation rights, Sarah wept with joy. It wasn't the end of the road, but it was a milestone that reminded her why she was fighting so hard. As Sarah continued her recovery, she felt a deep desire to help others who were walking the same difficult path. She became a certified recovery coach and started volunteering at the very rehab facility where she had once been a patient. Her experiences made her a compassionate and understanding mentor. She knew firsthand the struggles of addiction, and she used her story to inspire others to keep going, even when it felt impossible. Eventually, Sarah founded her recovery coaching practice, helping women who were fighting addiction and trying to rebuild their lives. She led support groups, gave talks, and worked one-on-one with clients who, like her, had lost their way but were determined to find it again. Her practice grew quickly, and soon Sarah was running workshops and seminars across the state, spreading a message of hope and resilience. Today, Sarah is 5 years sober. She has regained full custody of Lily, and their relationship is stronger than ever. Every day is a choice to stay sober, to continue healing, and to help others who are struggling with addiction. Sarah's life isn't perfect, and there are still challenges, but she faces them with a strength she never knew she had. When asked what advice she would give to someone struggling with addiction, Sarah says, "You can always come back from it. No matter how far you've fallen, there's a way out. But you have to believe in yourself, even when it feels impossible. Take it one day at a time, one step at a time. You're stronger than you think." Sarah's journey from addiction to recovery is a testament to the power of resilience, self-compassion, and the unwavering belief that it's never too late to turn your life around. She knows that the road to recovery is long and often difficult, but she also knows that it is possible, and that life on the other side is worth fighting for.
Beating cancer. Mark was only 28 years old when he received the news that would change his life forever: stage 3 colon cancer. He had been feeling tired and unwell for months, brushing off the symptoms as stress from work or the effects of his busy lifestyle. But when the abdominal pain became too much to ignore, he finally went to see a doctor. The diagnosis hit him like a ton of bricks. Cancer. It was a word he had only ever associated with older people, not with someone like him, young, active, and just beginning to make his mark in the world. The initial shock was overwhelming. Mark couldn't wrap his head around it. Just a week before, he had been working on a big project at the architecture firm where he had recently been promoted. He had plans, dreams of starting a family with his girlfriend, Julia, and ambitions of traveling the world. Suddenly, all of those dreams seemed to vanish, replaced by the cold, terrifying reality of cancer. He couldn't believe this was happening to him. Mark's oncologist laid out the treatment plan: aggressive chemotherapy followed by surgery to remove the tumor. The treatments would be grueling and would take months if not years. It was going to be a fight, a hard one. Mark had always prided himself on being strong, both physically and mentally, but cancer made him feel weak and vulnerable. In the days following his diagnosis, he spiraled into fear and anxiety. He wondered if he would survive. He thought about the possibility of death and the things he might never get to do. And the worst part was telling his family. Seeing the fear and sadness in their eyes nearly broke him. But Julia was his rock. From the moment they received the diagnosis, she was determined to stand by his side, no matter what. She refused to let him give in to despair. "We're going to beat this," she told him with unwavering conviction. "One day at a time, we're going to get through this together." Her strength inspired him, and though he was scared, Mark decided he wasn't ready to give up. He was going to fight. Chemotherapy started a few weeks later. Mark had been warned about the side effects, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. The nausea, the fatigue, the hair loss every day felt like a battle against his own body. Some days, just getting out of bed seemed like an impossible task. His muscles ached, his appetite disappeared, and he found himself constantly exhausted. At times, He didn't recognize the person staring back at him in the mirror. The once healthy, vibrant man he had been seemed to have disappeared. But there were good days too, days when he felt strong enough to go for a walk with Julia, or when he could enjoy a meal without feeling sick. Mark learned to cherish those moments, no matter how small they seemed. He started journaling, writing down his thoughts and emotions, and it became an outlet for the fear and frustration he felt inside. He also began sharing his journey online, starting a blog where he documented his experiences with cancer. What started as a personal project quickly grew into something more. People, both cancer patients and their loved ones, began reaching out to him, thanking him for his honesty and for offering a sense of hope to others facing similar battles. Mark found comfort in the connections he made through his blog. He began to feel less alone, realizing that there was an entire community of people who understood what he was going through. The messages of encouragement he received from strangers kept him going on the darkest days. Sharing his story helped him process his own emotions and made him feel like he was making a difference, even from a hospital bed. After months of chemotherapy, Mark underwent surgery to remove the tumor. The surgery was long and complicated, but it was successful. His doctors were hopeful, though they warned him that the road to recovery was far from over. Mark knew there was still a risk of recurrence, and the months that followed were filled with anxiety as he awaited test results and checkups. But he also felt something else: gratitude. Gratitude for his doctors and nurses, for the love and support of Julia, his family, and friends, and for the simple things like being able to sit outside in the sun or enjoy a meal without pain. Slowly but surely, Mark's strength began to return. He started exercising again, even if it was just short walks at first. He returned to work part-time, grateful to have colleagues who supported him through his treatment. The architecture firm had kept his position open for him, and returning to work helped him feel like his life was beginning to return to normal. His body still bore the scars of his battle, and he knew that cancer had changed him forever, but he also knew he was stronger than he had ever been before. A year after his surgery, Mark was declared cancer-free. It was the news he had been waiting for, the light at the end of a very long, dark tunnel. He celebrated with Julia and his family, tears of joy replacing the fear that had once consumed them. But Mark's journey didn't end with his remission. He knew that cancer had left a permanent mark on his life, and he wanted to use his experience to help others. Mark continued his blog, which had gained a significant following by then. He started volunteering at local hospitals, visiting cancer patients and offering support and encouragement. He would sit with them, share his story, and listen to theirs. He wanted them to know that there was hope, even when things seemed bleak, and that they weren't alone in their fight. Mark also became involved in fundraising efforts for cancer research, speaking at events and helping to raise awareness about the importance of early detection. He and Julia got married not long after his remission, and though cancer had changed the course of their lives, it had also brought them closer together, deepening their bond in ways they hadn't expected. Today, Mark is 5 years cancer-free. He knows that every day is a gift, and he lives his life with a renewed sense of purpose and gratitude. Cancer didn't defeat him, it transformed him. He often tells others, "Don't let fear control your life. You're stronger than you think, and no matter how hard the fight, there's always hope on the other side." Mark's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of love and support, and the belief that even in the face of the most terrifying battles, it is possible to come out stronger on the other side.
Healing from abuse. Rachel grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. On the outside, her family seemed perfect. Her father was a respected businessman, her mother was active in the community, and Rachel was a sweet, quiet girl who excelled in school. But behind closed doors, Rachel's life was a nightmare. Her father, who appeared to be a charming man in public, had a dark side. From the time Rachel was 10 years old, he abused her in ways that left deep emotional and physical scars. The abuse was something Rachel never spoke about. She lived in constant fear of her father, and she was ashamed of what was happening to her. She believed that no one would believe her if she told them. After all, her father was well-liked and influential in the community. Rachel felt trapped, stuck in a world where her cries for help would go unheard. Her mother seemed unaware or unwilling to acknowledge what was happening, and Rachel was left to bear the burden alone. The abuse continued for years, and it began to take a toll on every aspect of Rachel's life. At school, she withdrew from her friends and her grades started to slip. She developed severe anxiety and depression, but no one seemed to notice. Rachel became an expert at hiding her pain, smiling when necessary, and pretending that everything was fine. But inside, she was falling apart. By the time Rachel was 17, she felt like she had reached her breaking point. The abuse had escalated, and she could no longer see a way out. Desperation began to consume her, and she contemplated ending her life. She had convinced herself that there was no hope, no escape from the cycle of torment she was trapped in. But then, something unexpected happened. A teacher at her high school, Ms. Turner, noticed that something wasn't right. Ms. Turner had been one of Rachel's favorite teachers since middle school, and she had always been kind and supportive. One day, after class, she asked Rachel to stay behind for a moment. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. Rachel was taken aback. No one had ever asked her that before, at least not in a way that made her feel like they truly cared about the answer. She tried to brush it off, telling Ms. Turner that everything was fine, but the tears in her eyes betrayed her. Ms. Turner didn't push, but she handed Rachel a card with her phone number on it. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here," she said. That small act of kindness was like a lifeline for Rachel. It was the first time she felt like someone saw her, like someone cared about her well-being. That night, Rachel stared at the card for hours, debating whether to call. Eventually, she worked up the courage and dialed the number. Over the next few weeks, Rachel opened up to Ms. Turner in ways she had never done with anyone before. She told her about the abuse, the fear, and the shame that had consumed her life for so long. Ms. Turner listened patiently and reassured Rachel that what had happened to her was not her fault. She also encouraged Rachel to speak to a counselor who specialized in trauma and abuse, offering to help her find one and even go with her if that would make Rachel feel more comfortable. With Ms. Turner's support, Rachel took the first terrifying step toward healing. She reported the abuse. It was one of the hardest things she had ever done, but deep down, she knew it was the only way to stop the cycle and protect herself. The legal process that followed was long and emotionally draining. Rachel had to recount the details of the abuse to police, social workers, and eventually in court. There were days when she wanted to give up when it felt too hard to relive the trauma, but she kept going, determined to reclaim her life. Her father was eventually convicted and sentenced to prison. The relief Rachel felt was immense, but it was only the beginning of her healing journey. The abuse had left deep emotional wounds that wouldn't heal overnight. Rachel began seeing a trauma therapist who helped her process the pain she had carried for so long. Through therapy, she learned that her feelings of guilt and shame were misplaced, that the abuse had never been her fault. The therapy sessions were intense, often bringing up memories Rachel had tried to bury. But slowly, she began to confront those memories, working through the trauma instead of running from it. She learned coping mechanisms for her anxiety and depression, and gradually, she began to feel like she had control over her life again. One of the hardest parts of Rachel's healing process was rebuilding her relationship with her mother. For years, she had resented her mother for not protecting her, for not seeing what was happening. But in therapy, Rachel began to understand that her mother had been trapped in her way, emotionally manipulated and controlled by Rachel's father. It didn't excuse her mother's inaction, but it helped Rachel let go of some of the anger she had been holding on to. Rachel and her mother began to have honest, painful conversations about the past. They cried together, and Rachel finally told her mother everything she had endured. Her mother was devastated and guilt-ridden, but she vowed to be there for Rachel in any way she could. Though it took time, their relationship slowly began to heal as well. Rachel also reconnected with her friends, who had been worried about her but didn't know how to help. She realized that isolation had only made her pain worse, and she began to let people back into her life. Over time, she rediscovered the things that brought her joy: art, music, and writing. Rachel found that creative expression was a powerful way for her to process her emotions. She started painting again, something she had loved as a child but had abandoned during the years of abuse. Through her art, she began to reclaim the parts of herself that had been lost. As Rachel's confidence grew, so did her desire to help others who had experienced similar trauma. She began volunteering at a local shelter for survivors of abuse, sharing her story with women and children who were going through the same struggles she had once faced. Her experiences made her a compassionate and empathetic advocate, and she found that helping others was a crucial part of her own healing. Today, Rachel is in her late 20s and living a life she once thought was impossible. She has become an outspoken advocate for survivors of abuse, giving talks at schools, community centers, and support groups. She uses her story to raise awareness about the signs of abuse and the importance of speaking out, even when it feels like no one will listen. Rachel knows that healing is a lifelong process. There are still difficult days when the memories resurface, but she no longer feels defined by her past. She feels free. Rachel often tells other survivors, healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, and it's hard. But you can find peace, and you deserve happiness. What happened to you doesn't define who you are. You're so much stronger than you know. Rachel's journey from victim to survivor is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of compassion and support. She is living proof that it is possible to heal from even the deepest wound and that a life of joy, love, and purpose is possible after trauma.